Let's talk about the small datetime data type. So what is the small datetime data type? The small datetime data type allows you to create a column which can hold a specific date, that is years, months, and days. You can also specify just a specific time, that is hours, minutes, and seconds. Finally, you can specify both years, months, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. As you know, all data types are subject to certain limitations. For example, the tiny_int data type has limitations on what values it can hold. The varchar data type has limitations on the number of characters it can store. As you probably guessed, the small datetime data type has limitations as well. Now, the lowest level of granularity for a small datetime data type is the minute. Seconds and up to 3 fractional digits are rounded up to the nearest minute. In other words, seconds go bye-bye. Let's take a look at some useful facts about the small datetime data type. Although you don't usually see it, SQL Server stores a small datetime as the number of days since January 1st, 1900. This date, January 1st, 1900, is called the base date and is considered 0. That is, internally, a 0 indicates the day, January 1st, 1900 at midnight. A 1 indicates the date January 2nd, 1900 at midnight, and so on. Take note that, unlike the date data type, I'm using the words at midnight. This is because the small datetime data type holds both dates as well as times. Now, just as a reminder, for the date data type, the base date is January 1st, 1900. For the time data type, and for the lack of a better term, the base time is midnight. That is, internally, a 0 indicates January 1st, 1900 for a date data type, midnight for a time data type, and finally, January 1st, 1900 at midnight for the small datetime data type. Dates after January 1st, 1900 at midnight are stored as positive numbers. Dates prior to January 1st, 1900 at midnight are stored as negative numbers. Since small datetime can contain both a date component as well as a time component, the underlying number is no longer just an integral value like for the data type. The integral value still represents the number of days, though, since January 1st, 1900, but the fractional amount represents the portion of the day. In other words, the time. The same for the time data type. For example, if the underlying value is 1.5, that indicates that 1 day and a half day has passed since January 1st, 1900. Well, 1 day after January 1st, 1900 is just January 2nd, 1900, of course. But what is the half day? Well, a half day is just 12 hours, and 12 hours after midnight is 12 noon. So 1.5 indicates January 2nd, 1900 at 12 noon. Now, small datetime is limited in range from January 1st, 1900 to June 6th, 2079. Subtracting small datetimes gets you the number of days between those two dates. Unlike date and time, small datetime does indeed allow you to use the addition and subtraction operators, but you can still use dateadd and datediff if you want to, and it's probably a good idea to use them anyway. I'll show you some examples using the plus and minus signs because you're likely to run into legacy SQL code that uses them. Am I allowed to call 4 or 5-year-old SQL code legacy? Let's continue our talk about the small datetime data type. Let's look at some more fascinating facts about the small datetime data type. One way to describe a small datetime as a text string is to use the format 4-digit year followed by a dash, 2-digit month followed by a dash, 2-digit day followed by a blank space, hours in the 24-hour clock, colon, minutes, colon, seconds, a period, and up to 3 fractional digits. Recall that we used 4-digit year followed by a dash, 2-digit month followed by a dash, and 2-digit day, as well as a few other formats to describe a date data type. Also, we used hours, colon, minutes, colon, seconds, and so on to describe a time data type. The combination of these two describes the small datetime data type. Up to 3 fractional seconds are allowed, unlike the time data type, which allows for up to 7, but they are rounded. Now, you would think that the 30-second mark would be the dividing line between rounding up or rounding down a small date time, just as 0.5 is the dividing line for rounding a number. Well, that's not the case here. If your seconds are 29.999 or higher, they are rounded up to the nearest minute. If your seconds are 29.998 or lower, they are rounded down to the nearest minute. Note that you are allowed up to 3 digits of fractional seconds. If you specify any more than that, you get an error message and Microsoft drains all of your bank accounts. Now, let's take a look at how we can create a column in a table using the small date time data type. As you see, our column DT_1 is a small date time data type. The metadata is, as you'd expect, DT_1 is a small date time. Finally, in SQL Server Management Studio, the table MyTable has one column, and that's a small date time. Let's continue our talk about the small date time data type. So what are good uses for the small date time data type? One good use is to record the date and time of an ATM transaction. Another good use is to record the date and time of a grocery store purchase. You can record a date and time of a child's birth. Another good use is to record the date and time of a doctor or dentist appointment. Another use is to record the date and time a patient received medication such as chemotherapy. Finally, you can record the date and time when a traffic jam occurred at an intersection. Now, note that you don't always need to have a date component and a time component when using a small date time. For example, you can record the date of birth without the time and let the time default to midnight. Or you can record a specific time without the date and let the date default to January 1st, 1900. Naturally, you probably shouldn't use small date time if a date or time data type is the more natural choice. Finally, Microsoft recommends using the date, time, and date time 2 data types for all any new work, but they haven't gone so far as to deprecate small date time or date time.